There you are. Yes, Professor Tarquin Danglebury here, you see. You may see that I'm in the surroundings of SBRE Brand. That is for the very reason that he has asked me to do today's Inkcyclopedia entry. You may wonder why exactly would Professor Tarquin Danglebury actually do the Encyclopedia entry. Well, the very simple answer is that today we're going to be talking about the very first Conway Stewart ink that is covered in the Encyclopedia. You see, Conway Stewart, the company, was kind enough to hook up the FP geeks with the full set of the 6 inks they have recently launched, which is very nice. Isn't it nice? I thought it was very nice. Now, SBRE Brown knows his limitations, and he knows that I'm a professor of penology over there at Cambridge. No, there. Sorry, it's over there. And he said, Professor Tarquin Danglebury, would you please be so kind as to take over these encyclopedia entries for me, because I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Now, I know, I mean, everybody knows he is not entirely sure what he was doing, but when it comes to Conway Stewart inks, it's a very typical thing. And I went to school with Conway Stewart, with the gentleman, Conway Stewart. I went to school with him, primary school. It was a long time ago, I think, years or so, a lot of years. And we went to school together, and we were fairly good friends. Yes, we were very good friends. And so I know a lot about Conway Stewart. So today, we're going to talk about this ink. This ink comes in this very nice package. Of course, it has the Union Jack on there. It has a Conway Stewart nib on there, 18 karat gold. I don't know exactly which pen this is. Doesn't really matter. What matters is that it's made in England. And it is 80 milliliters. ConwayStewart.com, that's what it says. I don't have a computer, so I wouldn't know, but apparently it has a website. You open up the little box, and out comes one of these bottles of ink. And today I thought we're going to talk about this one, and this one is Saint Blazey. Saint Blazey. Now, as you know, all of these inks, or maybe you don't know, then I'm going to tell you now, and then you will know, all of these inks are named after something that's important to England, to the UK, you see? Now, Saint Blazey is, in fact, it's a red ink. Let me start there. It's a very red ink. I'm not sure whether I can show you. You'll see that later in the writing sample, of course. No, well, believe me, it is a red ink. You see a little bit in the neck of the bottle right there. Now, Saint Blazey, why is it called Saint Blazey? Who is Saint Blazey? What is Saint Blazey? Professor Tarquin Danglebury, what is Saint Blazey? Well, it's a very simple thing. Saint Blazey is the patron saint of firemen. Yes, Saint Blazey, you know, blazing. That's actually where the expression "a blazing fire" comes from. Saint Blazey, please don't set my house on fire. We used to sing that a lot when we were children. So it's the patron saint of firemen all over the world, and therefore it is a very red ink. Awfully well chosen by Conway Stewart, I would say. Very interesting, very nice to see. It's an ink that for some reason Lord Windermere is quite fond of. Now, he likes red inks. Actually, he has a special ink made in Thailand, which is actually made of ground crabs. He's a lobster, and apparently lobsters don't really like crabs, do you? No, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. So, yeah, so it's very interesting. Lord Windermere likes it. I may give this bottle to Lord Windermere because he likes red ink so much. And I think that for now, I've been talking for more than enough time. I should just go over to the writing sample. So that's what we're going to do next, all for the FB Geeks. Well, that's all there's to it. So I hope this is going to be useful, and go away. Tally-ho! So, let me see what we're going to do today. Today we're going to have a look at the following ink. Conway Stewart, Saint Blazey. Let us start with some fine writing. Saint Blazey, Saint Blazey. Don't set me on fire. It's a poem I'm quite sure we recited when we were younger. Me and my colleagues there down at Cambridge, and also at West Nibshire. I was born in West Nibshire, and I seem to remember we always used to sing this. Saint Blazey, don't set me on fire, you see. Blazey, Saint Blazey. There was a comma there. Don't set me on fire, you see. Fire. Alright. Broad. Serious nibbage. I was the coiner of the term serious nibbage, you see. A lot of people seem to think that it was SBRA Brown, but it was not at all. It was, in fact, me, my person, who has developed the term serious nibbage. What you are seeing so far is a very nice, deep, red ink, I would say. Very dark. Not really dark, it's very intense. A very intense ink, so to speak. Yes. This is an italic nib. Fire. Yes, there you go. And then I suppose that we should do a couple of passes so that we can have an idea of the shading and saturation of the ink, so to speak. 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's not writing. Oh. 1 second. That's better. Something that I find quite fascinating is that this seems to lean a little bit toward rouge. It's not really very, pure red. It can be a little bit somewhat on the pinkish side, so to speak, if that makes any sense to you. And so I think that it's while we are awaiting the drying of this, we need to do some flex writing. I'm afraid I skipped the flex writing. Let us do some flex writing now. It's never too late for flexi writing. I seem to be getting some railroading issues. Let me put some ink into the feed. There we go. Yeah, it's much better now. Nice wet ink. Quite dark and intense red now. Very saturated. Very pleasant to use, etc. Alright, well, I would say that right now we should concern us with some testing. Testing of the ink. And in fact, I got a list of tests that I should run on the ink. The first being something with a knife. The Tardif test or something, I don't know. Lot of testing. I hate testing. I prefer writing. Then there is something with, I don't know, an eyedropper or something. I will leave that to dry for a second. Then we should do something with a brush. Back to those in a second. Oh yes, and finally, there was something going on with the finger, but I cannot do this. I make it a point not to stick my finger in strange people's inkwells. I don't know where they've been, so I had to come up with something else. So that's what I'm going to do now. This will not be a brown benchmark. This will be a Tarquin test. There we go. The Tarquin test. Alright, let us do a second pass.
So what we're getting here is that nice red. Something that's obvious from the flex writing is that this is a very nice dark red, very dark red, whereas this is a bit lighter. So apparently when you use a lot of ink, it gets more saturated, and you get this very nice dark, intense red color. Okay, now let's have a look here, an eyedropper. I think we can go for that eyedropper thing. An eyedropper. Oh wait, we always use the eyedropper on this. Yes, I have to check my notes. This brown fellow does stuff that I cannot follow what he's doing. Bloody amateur. Right, so this was the eyedropper part. And then we have something with a brush. I don't know. Right. Then, I think we should do a third pass. Don't you think so? Yes, I do. And while all of that's drying, and all these tests are drying, I think I should start writing up our scorecard. So, without further ado, let's have a look at all of this. We have cleaning. Well, it's a red ink, and red inks can be a little bit difficult to clean out of a pen, but for some reason, as you can see in this clear converter, it doesn't seem to stain particularly much. So I don't think this is going to be a large issue. So I would say cleaning is good. Then we have the bleed through. Yes, well, bleed through, we're just going to have to check that later on. I don't know that right now. We'll have to see that when the moment comes, and I can do all the things, and I can check the thing with the, and I turn it around, and Then we have color. It's blue. No, wait. No, it's a red. Shading. Well, what do we think of shading, really? I can't say I see a whole lot, and yet in this flex writing there does seem to be a fairly pleasant bit of shading stuff going on. I wouldn't say this is the best shading ink I've ever seen, and then yet it's not entirely terrible either. So as to shading, I would say it's okay. Then we have flow. Very good. Red inks, in my experience, which is considerable, I can tell you, red inks can be a little bit prone to skipping and hard starting. And with this ink so far, I'm experiencing none of that, so that's a very good idea. Feathering. I have to check that later when we have used some other paper. Drying time. Drying time seems to be okay. With these 3 passes, things seem to dry up fairly quickly. And then finally, we have waterproofness. Well, speaking of that, this is probably as good a moment as any to get rid of the extra water here, the excess water. This is not going to work, I'm afraid. Where's my cloth? Oh yes, I'm resting my pens on my ink cloth. I just grab a tissue. Here we have tissues. And away is the ink. And incidentally, away is also the writing. Waterproofness of this ink doesn't seem to be phenomenal, so to speak. As you can see, this stuff where I used that buggered brush or whatever the name was, it's pretty much gone, and with this fat writing it's almost entirely gone. So I'm going to say that waterproofness is not that great. What can we conclude from the other tests? Here we have the tar diff test, or whatever it was called. You can see some interesting shading, a rouge-like color right there, and also some other stuff, like for example here this much darker red. You see that going on, which is much darker and reminds me a little bit of the thing where you go and with that kind of stuff. And also here we have the actual Tarquin test. As you can see here, a nice, pretty free-flowing ink. Again, a little bit of shading in there, you see it. So I think that's all very interesting, but now we have to use some other paper. So I'm going to tear off this sheet of paper, and I will put some copier paper down right there. Right there. Right. Right? Yes. Here. No, there. Wait. Yes. Good. Here we are. Some fine writing. St. Blazey in West Nibshire. I was born there, you see. Many people visited. They were all trying to find the house in which I was born. Unfortunately, it burned down. It was an attack by ballpoint users, you see. They didn't really like me being the world's foremost professor of penology, and so they burnt the whole bloody thing down. St. Blazey, apparently my prayers to St. Blazey didn't actually work. Fortunately, no one was hurt, except from one ballpoint user, but that's not really an issue. Nibshire. If you have trouble locating West Nibshire in your atlas, there may be something wrong with your atlas. In principle, it should be there. If you cannot find it, you will find it just to the left of East Nibshire, you see. Broad. Italic. St. Blazey, you see. So perhaps it would be good to do a little bit of flex writing. Flexi writing. I'm not very good at that, I have to admit. And then finally, one of those big letters once again. Maybe the T for Tarquin. So when it comes to West Nibshire, because now I'm pretty sure you all want to know. Let me see if I can draw you a simple map. So you have the UK. This is a very simple diagram, of course. I cannot really go into detail. You have London about there, and that's not where it is. So here is the Scottish border, right? And then this sort of progresses from there into hills and all that kind of stuff. Right now, this looks like a large egg wearing a hat. I'm sorry about that. Well, just below the Scottish border, you see, right there. This is what I call the Scottish border. So then, I mean, you got this. So, and then, you know, you got Europe here. You got the Netherlands, and then I deny the existence of France. So there's a big hole here, and then you have Spain, and you know. So here we have this. Here we have the SB, the Scottish border. And then just below the border, right there is East Nibshire. And to the left of that, about there, is West Nibshire. So if you cannot find it on your atlas, it should be right there. Just saying, you know, for future reference. Okay, so let's see what we did. We have some writing. Again, I would say shading. It's there, but it is not the most pronounced I've ever seen. Flexi writing. Feathering is crazy. You see that? That is crazy feathering. I'm sure this ink may have done some, well, stuff in the 60s or something, and then it turned all feathery. So that's not a good thing. And then here we have this very fat writing, the T for Tarquin, and you can see some feathering in the inky spots too, the spots with a lot of ink, but this is quite shocking. That's a lot of feathering. Then again, this is cheap copy of paper. If you check out the flex writing on Rhodia, you don't see any feathering at all. So apparently it's not really an issue, but you know, if you're using this kind of paper, you may be in a wee spot of trouble. Now if you do regular, normal, standard writing, like this, I don't see a whole lot of feathering. A little bit in the broad nib. I see it a little bit there. But, you know, That's pushing it, perhaps. Okay, so there you have it. We should finish up our scorecard for Saint Blazey. Saint Blazey. Bleed through, yes, I want to see bleed through. Do we have bleed through? Please show me the bleed through. I don't really see any bleed through. A little bit with the Tarquin test. There's a little bit there for the third pass, but for the regular writing, no real bleed through. On the copier paper, things change drastically. You see for the flex writing, that's almost legible. It's completely bled through. The T for Tarquin has also bled through. And in regular writing, look at that. Even the fine writing bleeds through a little bit. Medium writing, a little bit. Broad writing, quite some bits of bleed through. And in italic writing too. So apparently this ink, if you're going to use it on very cheap paper, you may be in a wee spot of trouble, as my uncle used to say. Bleed through. Well, okay. Strongly dependent on the paper used, but I suppose that's quite obvious. Feathering, okay. Again, very dependent on the paper used. On Rhodia, no feathering. On copier paper, extreme feathering. So it depends. Finally, I would like to do a small comparison. Here we go. Let me see. So what we have as here is Saint Blazey. Saint Blazey. Why doesn't this write? Saint Blazey. A nice red ink, quite red. A little bit on the rouge side, if you ask me. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Then we have another ink. And I chose here something that doesn't write too. This is an ink that my Dutch colleagues quite often send me. Ackerman Chinatown. A very nice bright red. And I hope that you can sort of see why I picked this as a completely different ink type thing, like, you know. So, I think there are some commonalities here, except this is a very bright red, this may be a bit darker, and maybe a bit more on the rouge side of things, but in the end, I think you get two very nice reds. And I have to say, I have become quite enamored with Saint Blazey. I'm enjoying it quite a lot. So, there you have it. Conway Stewart, my favourite brand of all time. Saint Blazey. I enjoyed doing this Inkcyclopedia entry. I'm sorry I was not as fluent as Mr. Brown was, but, you know, I don't get as much practice as he does. Yeah, I'm sure the next one will be a bit more fluid. We have 5 more of these very nice Conway Stewart inks to go. I will see you next week, and for now, I would say, ta-ta!